happy home service.
Hello and welcome back to another slice of painting Panzer IV action. Here you can see me skillfully testing or dry brushing a Zvezda Panzer III in order to make sure that I didn't apply too much paint to my airbrushed Panzer IVs with the track pinging off into the distance. The reason why I was doing this really was to ensure that when I was applying a dry brushed highlight of dunkel shine, which is basically a very light yellow over the top of my vehicles, I didn't go berserk and start smearing it all over the carefully airbrushed surfaces that I'd been working on. So really, compared to where I was last time, having airbrushed the tritone camouflage over the base coated Panzer IVs, I was just applying this simple highlight of light yellow before moving on to the application of a filter to blend in all of these colours. For the filter I chose to use MiG Ammo's Tan for 3-tone camo filter, and this was applied with a soft, flat, broad brush to the surface of the vehicle, as you can see me doing here. The intention, as I said, was to blend in the dry brushed highlights with the modulated base coat and the brown and the green tritone camo. The filter is brushed over the entire surface of the vehicle, being careful not to let it pool in any of the recesses, as it's not a wash. It's just intended to tone down those colours and begin to blend them all together whilst preserving the integrity of the individual colours. And you can see that all I did was just to brush that onto the vehicles, being sure to get it into all the nooks and crannies between the shirtsen and the hull, so that there were not highlights in low lighted areas. So that took minutes really in the overall scheme of things, and was quite relaxing getting everything else that had been going on. The next stage really was to apply a coat of satin varnish to seal the filter and go about choosing some decals for the vehicles. I did a bit of research and identified where turret numbers needed to go, and I was going to make these 21st Panzer IVs, so I had to fish out some decals from Dom's Decals. They do a nice line in 21st Panzer, well, all the Panzer Division logos really, but I got those and started to cut them out and mark out where they were going to go. And essentially it's a cross, a Balkenkreuz, so I should say, even if I butcher the German language, applied to the front of the shirtsens around the turret, next to the platoon number, and then you can have a Balkenkreuz on the rear of the turret if you wanted, and the 21st Panzer Division's logo symbol, the D shape, on the front right of the hull and the rear right of the hull. So you can see me here cutting out the decals, trying to keep them as close to the motifs as possible. And I was using another new toy that I've got, which is a trumpeter decal tray. And what I like about this is that you can pop your decals in, as you see me doing here, using a soft old brush, and then it comes with this natty little tray that you'll see me using in a minute that enables you to scoop the decal off the paper and apply it to the surface of your model, so that even if it's separated in the tray from the backing paper, you should be able to scoop it out or slide it out and slide it onto the surface of your vehicle without it curling or folding. And that's particularly useful when you're working with really small decals here, a couple millimeters across. So, as I said, after having applied the satin varnish to seal the filter, I applied a coating of gloss varnish to the locations where I would be applying the decals, and once that had dried, you can see that I was then just putting a light coat of micro set decal solution on the places where I would ultimately be using or placing the decals. That was to prepare the surface and remove any other sort of air bubbles or any irregularities that would help that decal set on the surface. And then hopefully you'll see how this little tray comes into play. Once you can see, all I'm doing here is just testing to see how the decal is sitting on the backing paper, and if it moves when I prod it with my paintbrush, I dig out the little tray that you can see coming into action here and slide the decal onto the tray, and then you can use it to position it neatly on the surface of your model. What I like about this little tray is that if the decal separates from the backing paper, you can still use it, you can still pick it up without it curling or folding and apply it to your model. Similarly, as you can see, what I'm doing here is then just sliding it off the backing paper and onto the surface of the model. I found that positioning the Panzer turret on its side was useful, but as you can see, it falls over. So for the later ones, what I managed to do is just put a blob of blue tack down, wedge the turret in there, and then stick the numbers on. Once the numbers were applied next to each other, I used some Microsol setting solution just to push that decal into the surface of the vehicle and make it conform to any of the irregularities of the surface, be it the hatches, the side hatches in the Scherzen, or the vision ports on the side of turrets and the like. Once the decals had set, I then sealed them with another layer of gloss and satin varnish to protect them from the next stage. The next stage is to apply initial weathering using a range of oil colours that you can see arrayed here in a video that I had started but not really finished when I was painting some Marder 3s, I think, looking at those. Essentially, I'm new to oils and their use in models, and I was inspired to use them by reading the excellent Painting Wargaming Tanks by Ruben Torregrossa and Mig Jimenez. Essentially, they're showing you an initial weathering technique where you apply oils to the surface of your vehicles, and then you use a form of refined turpentine or white spirits, or you can use the odor-free stuff, or even the regular stuff, to basically wipe those colours over your model like a filter. But it creates the effect of dust, rain marks, rust, and it weathers and blends those colours together without, or the base colours that they're applied over, without obscuring them. And the principle here really is working from the top of the vehicle to use spots of light colour to then apply spots of darker colour in the recesses, so you create contrast between raised areas. And that might seem a bit bonkers on vehicles of this scale, but I found it really useful for adding shadows around gun mantles, simulating dirt and grime around engine blocks, but also then adding in sort of dust and highlights to the upper surfaces of vehicles, as I hope you can see in some of the examples that I'm using in a bit. So let's have a look at how it actually worked in practice. What I love about using oils is that you don't have to be precious. You can just get your tubes, squirt out your paint onto a piece of cardboard, and then just blob, blob, blob away on the surfaces. As long as you follow the principle of the lighter colours at the top and the darker colours where you want shadow, it should work for you, and it's very forgiving. If you make a cock up, if the colours go on too heavily or without any effect, you can just wipe the surface with turpentine and a soft brush, and you just remove the colour. So it's great. You can see that I'm using a sophisticated cardboard palette, and the reason why I'm doing that is because it helps absorb some of the oil, which is the carrier for the pigment with oils, and it speeds up the drying time. And you really, even with that, you're going to have to leave your vehicles overnight. What's nice about this effect is that, again, it's another way of blending in these colours without obscuring them, and because you're putting lighter colours at the top and darker colours at the bottom, you're creating contrast, which is nice. And it might seem a bit pretentious to be doing this on vehicles this size, but I think you do start to notice a difference. Secondly, or thirdly, I guess, one of the things I like about this is that when you apply these colours, you get kind of like rain mark effects. You can have rust streaks running down, and it's a nice way of getting some initial weathering on your vehicle in a very relaxed way. There's no stress here. You're just going to apply the colours, and if you don't like it, just get rid of it. And you can see what I'm doing here is just applying some colours to the upper surfaces, but where they really come into their own is on things like the fenders there, running the darker colours that you can see me just brushing in gently with a broad flat brush, not soaked in turpentine. You can see I keep dipping it down onto that kitchen tray, onto that kitchen roll, to take off any surplus. So I'm not turning it into a wash, I'm just brushing the colour out and fading it into the model. This really comes into its own on the shirtsen, as you can imagine, which is the large flat surfaces there, where you can start to create dust streaks, rust marks, damage. So blob on your colours, as you can see me doing here. I'm seeming to be favouring quite a bit of white or cream on that, and I tend to do the whole vehicle really in one sitting, as long as you don't smudge it with your fingers. Blob on the colours, make sure you have an intermediate colour a bit further down, like I'm not doing here. There you go. I've got some yellows creeping in there. Try and use colours that are relative to the scheme that you're painting. So if you want to intensify the brown colour, put brown over brown. If you want to highlight an area that you've missed in terms of the filter, put a white over it. If you want to darken some of the areas where the mud will accumulate, you can see what I'm blobbing on here now. You can put your browns, your blues and your grey into these areas, which will create a darker contrast. When you're using colours like blue, which seems a bit odd on a vehicle like this, don't overdo it. Leave it for the areas of deepest, darkest shadow. And then with your soft brush, just pull the colour down over the surface of your vehicle. Don't get carried away with it. You can see that you end up with some streaks, which is what you're aiming for, but don't go for anything too bold. So the super white streak that you can see in this example, you're going to need to just brush that out a little bit, unless that's a look that you're comfortable with. The effect is very subtle, but nevertheless significant, and once it's done, you'll need to seal it all in another layer of satin varnish, because we're going to be doing a pin wash next, and that's also enamel. I'm going to be using enamels for that, and we don't want that to then kind of blend in and obscure the work that we've already done. So it's just another way of protecting the model, and of course the more layers of varnish that you put down, the more you'll be able to handle the figure when it's on the table. So that sort of pretty much brings you up to speed where I've got with that. 10 days was ambitious. I was able to finish these tanks to a certain standard and play last weekend, but we'll keep cracking on with this painting tutorial to see if we can get them finished within a reasonable time frame. Well, that's everything. Thanks for watching. I hope it's been useful. I'll catch you in the next one.